Chapter 2. Inside the stone cottage in the center of the floor lay the dead man, stretched out on an iron bier. Nearby a small fire crackled in a thurible on a silver tray. The cleansing smell of smoke and incense and sandal was everywhere. Three sides of the room. Buchia was right. The mourners, present and waiting, were crowded with women of various ages draped in freshly laundered white saris, swans, elegant in their griefs. They sat shoulder to shoulder in closely arranged wooden chairs, their hair covered by scarves or bob-pin trains of saris contained, like their grief, in an orderly, well-adjusted decorum. Some of them conferred in whispers. The men wore spotless white as well, but ambled outside or stood around in random clusters on the crowded veranda. Some of them wore tall, brooding headgear. Most knew each other and exchanged pleasantries or condolences in muted murmurs. Everyone's head was covered, and many bent in prayer. Must have been an important Baba, this big man, I thought to myself, to have attracted such a large and well-decked retinue of mourners. Standing outside the funeral chamber, I hurriedly untied and reknotted the sacred girdle around my waist. Fardun was already there, waiting. He's a Nasser too, though at least 20 years my senior. Presently we entered the stone cottage together. Gripping a hefty 3-inch long iron nail I had collected from the storeroom on my way up, I got down on my hunches and described a circle on the floor at radius of about 3 feet around the supine body in an anti-clockwise direction. Fardun tagged behind me at the end of a long white cloth tape, both of us softly reciting in tandem, 333 Yatha Ahu Varius, one of the prescribed ancient hymns that keep the demon of foulness at bay. This magic circle, once drawn, firmly seals in the visible contamination emanating from the corpse, or so it is believed. This was all pretty much routine. I wasn't going to be needed again until it was time to carry the corpse up to the tower, and I was thinking perhaps there might be just enough time to catch a nap. One of the Khandiyas, Bhumi or Fali perhaps, would have been assigned the task of bringing up Moti the bitch on a leash, to show her the corpse once the priests were through. But before we could make our exit through the crowded funeral cottage, two robed priests padded in, not willing to wait any more. They seemed to be sulking, impatient about the delay I had presumably been responsible for. Holding a long white handkerchief between them, they swayed from side to side, chanting a prayer of penitence, beseeching forgiveness from the Almighty on behalf of the large dead man whose name was Peshotan Pavri. Meanwhile, a young girl, possibly a granddaughter of the deceased, began wailing. An older woman sitting beside her put an arm around the young girl and squeezed her comfortably, while another in front of them turned in her chair and began whispering urgently. "No, no, my dear, must not cry like that. Papa's happy, darling. What's there to cry about?" said the other woman. "If you shed tears, they will only become like heavy boulders pinning his soul down to earth. Let him go, let him soar up, Ruby." Presently the young girl, sobbing, softened to a whimper, became more sibilant, elegiac. People never give a thought to death while they are still dying, I reflected as the priest droned on. And when it comes upon you unannounced, there's a shock and disbelief, and a great gnashing of teeth. As Fardun and I withdrew from the crowded funeral hall, the congregated mourners shrank perceptibly, leaving a clear if narrow passage for us to walk through. I was thinking of my own little girl, who must be awake now, perhaps sitting in her grandpa's lap, munching on those 2 slices of bread. Despite my misgiving about the man, I felt grateful for Tamu that he was there to keep her company. That Koyoji had allowed the dotard to stay up in his quarters even though he is too old for any real work. Lost in thought, I didn't notice a particularly lean, cadaverous man with a large mole on his forehead seated on the veranda among crowds of family and friends, nor did he see me approach. Perhaps he was merely inattentive or too abstracted from long hours of prayer. One leg hoisted over the other, vigorously wagging his crooked foot at the ankle while silently moving his lips, he was completely engrossed in a thick but diminutive prayer book. As I passed him, my leg brushed against this man's oscillating shoe. Accidentally, of course, but the man who had seemed so lost in prayer, so oblivious of his surroundings, suddenly sprang up to life. With the suddenness of spring-operated toy he leaped to his feet, and began trembling like a leaf. A few other mourners noticed that something out of the ordinary was going on. Now the bony figure started making loud and insistent buzzing noises, like incensed bee. He was saying something to me, abusing me in all probability, protesting his defilement at my hands, but all of it wordlessly, without parting his lips, which remained tightly pressed together. Having once trained for priesthood myself, I was familiar with this routine practiced by the most devout. The hallowed chain of prayer they have been so diligently weaving must not be interrupted by the profane utterances of everyday speech. Hence the buzzing. In a ferocious dumb chariot the man was urging me to keep my distance, to take my unholy self out of his sight, disappear from the very face of the earth, if I read him correctly. All the while flailing his arms and fists in the air like one possessed. Other mourners stood up too, shocked. The man who I had thus desecrated by the graze of my thin against his polished leather shoe seemed angry enough to strike me, but fear of further despoilment rendered him impotent and apoplectic with rage. I felt an urge to break into guffaws of laughter. I felt like embracing this strangely awkward man so terrified of the demon of putrefaction, smoothing him in a friendly bear hug and saying, "Do you seriously believe you won't need me one day?" Astride those emaciated shoulders rides the ghost of a corpse. You don't see him now, but it's only a matter of time, believe me, before your blood turns to ice, your limbs hardens like wood. Then ask yourself, will your near and dear ones wash and clothe you for the final goodbye? No, sweet man, you will have to depend on one of us, and then we will have to rub you all over. Of course, I didn't dare deliver that prayer, Ed. Instead, only mumbled contritely, "Forgive me, please. My mistake, Babaji. Please forgive." And bowing low, quickly took my leave of him, as the rest of the grim congregation on the veranda glared at me. I had witnessed instances of corpse-bearer being fined by Koyaji, or even thrashed by self-important and wrathful members of our tribe for sitting on a bench intended for public use, or merely leaning against a wall in one of the pavilions during large funerals that teemed with mourners. Infringing the strict rules of segregation could be dangerous for us corpse-bearer. Greatly relieved to have got away so lightly, I allowed my mind to relax, feel once again the silence and peace of the woods. I had been feeling rather queasy and unwell all morning. What I wanted to do most of all was get back to my quarters, catch some sleep. But while cutting through the casuarina grove, I found myself intercepted by Buchia. How the news of the tiny furor I had caused got to him so swiftly I will never know, but he is not one to overlook such blunders. Without any qualms, spiritual or otherwise, Burchia thought nothing of laying hand on a corpse-bearer. By close association, I suspect he sees himself as completely sullied anyway. Can't see where you are going, Pancho. Bumping into all and sundry instead of minding your own fucking business. Butchers wore long sideburns that flowered into a sort of fleecy half-beard. He had a high dome of forehead with very little hair on his head. Something about him never failed to evoke a sense of revulsion in me. It wasn't just his unpleasant foul-mouthedness, or his oddly androgynous voice always startling to hear. Something about the very core of the man was unmistakably malodorous. if not malignant. Short and stocky, but very strong, all of a sudden he slapped me on the back of my head. There didn't seem to me much force behind the blow, but for a few seconds I was seeing double. "Don't you dare lift your hand on me," I protested, reflexly raising my bunched up fist. "And what will you do, my dear pillow?" He laughed. "Box my ears?" His tone was no longer threatening, but teasing rather, almost affectionate in its use of my abbreviated name. No one else ever called me that. He puts his arm around me, tickling the nape of my neck with his index finger as if I were a kitten. But I shook him off fiercely with my elbow. "Your dad used his influence to get you this job. You know that?" He purred. "But is he here now to protect you? I let you have a good snooze until so late this morning. Kept everyone waiting so you could wake up fresh. Didn't I? Answer me, below. Didn't I? Now cool off and get some more rest while you can. Only make sure you are back in 45 minutes to take the cars up to the tower. And immediately after that, be ready to start moving again. I have already informed the others." What? Clearly there was no redress against this unpleasant man's manipulative authority. "What on earth are you staring at me for?" continued Buccia. "The three others on duty will accompany you. They are washing the byre, and Jugnu as well. But where to now?" "Kolaba. Kasro Bagh. Kolaba? Oh God! Take the address from my office before you leave." Groaning and moaning won't help when there's work to be done. "We will start straight after lunch then?" I asked. Was there a hint of exertion in my voice? Perhaps, but it was already 9:45, and I was famished. "Don't act cocky with me. Didn't I just tell you? Immediately after this body has been consigned to the tower." I saw him raise his hand as if to smack me on the head again, but I glared at him so fiercely he checked himself. "Next funeral has to start at 4. If you wait for lunch you will never make it back before sunset. I'll take you 2 hours just to reach Kolaba." "This is too much, Sahib. Even we need to eat sometime and rest. It's heavy work. What happened to the hears?" "Never mind the hears. These are trying times for everyone. Just do as you are told, Pillow. There will be other times later for rest and recreation too. Don't you think I too could use some of that once in a while? What do you say?" And he scratched the nape of my neck again. Sickened, I walked away without saying another word. Puchia had a reputation for liking boys, of bringing young men up to his quarters at night. If he had touched me again, I swear I would have struck him. But the truth is I was completely off colour that morning, ruining my previous night's indulgence. A pint of country would have served us better than the full bottle that we had gludged down at top speed. Truth to tell, a most dreadful exhaustion had made us greedy for self-effacement.